to what extent does one need to understand Buddhism in order to practice Chan? Right, that's the question.
Yeah.
So may I ask who asked that question?
I raised that question, and you probably can guess where this comes from. And also Ritas and also Inbo had a similar conversation on email, because Inbo is my wife, so I know why she's talking to Ritas, also talking about, do we need to have a very solid understanding of Buddhist concepts or the systematic study of Buddhism in order to practice Chan. So another view is actually Chan practice, not dwelling on words, is so in a way is relatively independent, can be practiced, can be applied in a daily life without have to go through the Buddhist concept.
Okay, it's a larger context. Thank you for that. You know, that's the problem with words. You know, words tend to classify and separate what might be very fluid, what might be even the same, into two separate realms, two separate things. When we talk about Buddha Dharma, some people may think it's different than Chan. Buddha Dharma, people may think is systematized. That systematization is a particular kind of Buddha Dharma. It's not necessarily the kind that Shakyamuni Buddha taught. So what did he taught his students? So we have to keep that in mind. After his passing, how did people organize Buddha Dharma? And how did it, and if we know the history, development of Buddha Dharma, then we see that it became more and more complicated. More and more complicated. And then Chan just simplified it. And some of the practice traditions, if you look at some of the practice traditions, they simplified it. Pure Land tradition, and Southeast Asia, the forest dwelling tradition. So, for example, in the Vipassana, you think the teachers would say, first you have to practice, you have to understand systematically how Buddhism teaches. Go study the Abhidharma, and then we can teach you about meditation. So it's not the way Shakyamuni Buddha taught. He taught according to the needs of the people, so that his teachings will penetrate to his students' lives, directly applicable. And he taught mainly two things. And if one is able to profoundly understand these two, then they will understand Buddha Dharma. He also explicitly said, what is Buddha Dharma? What is Dharma? Of course, he wouldn't say Buddha Dharma because he is the Buddha, the Buddha's Dharma. So he would say, what is the Dharma? In the Diamond Sutra, for example, and many other Prajna Paramita genre of scriptures and other texts too, you see these two things, and you come to know the Dharma. And when a person penetrates these two, then it's what's called their Dharma eye opens. The Dharma eye opens. 法眼, 开法眼. So what are these two? Dependent origination. This exists because of that. This shall cease because that ceases. All things are interconnected. Second, impermanence. All things change. So to put it in a simpler way, what I call these two teachings is Buddha Dharma is about relationships, connections. That's dependent origination. And Buddha Dharma is about new beginnings. Every moment is a new beginning. That's impermanent. That's the teachings. When we hear impermanence, we think it's something negative, passive, pessimistic. So I just turn it around to something more pleasant. Everything is a new beginning. So these two teachings, one describes reality, Dharma, from the perspective of space. It's synchronic. Everything's connected. Everything's connected, interconnected. And the other one comes from a temporal perspective, new beginnings. Can you all appreciate that? Understand what I'm talking about? That's Buddha Dharma. So what is this truth that they're trying to penetrate from the spatial and temporal perspective? Freedom, our intrinsic freedom, our potential for freedom, just another way to call it nirvana. There are other terms for it, no self. Like I said before, Guogu is made up of non-Guogu. Guogu is made up of all of you, all the knowledge I have, the experience I have. It's dependent on many different things. So it's about connections. How do we practice that? How do we relate to the method? It's about connection. How to connect. How to connect to your method. What kind of relationship we want to build with our method? When I say that we have to relax the body, all of you just did in meditation, when you relax the body, what kind of relationship you want to build with your body? You want to establish, you want to come to know the body. So it's about connections. If you can't use the method well, how do you work with the method? It's also about connection. You understand that? Yes? And when we're in trouble, when we encounter difficulties, we don't lose hope. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Every moment's a new beginning. So we have to apply this in our lives. Every day is a new beginning. When we examine the nature of mind, we understand that every day is a new beginning. Every moment is fresh. What is this freshness? Openness. What is it that allows for this? When we experience this moment, there's a present moment. There's an openness, awareness. Is there a distinction between present moment and awareness? What does this awareness consist of? What are the qualities? Clarity. This clarity, it's about connection. It's inseparable. So connection, freshness, they're inseparable. The nature of mind, even, let alone daily practice, daily life, everything. These two principles is applicable to everything. So now, all the Buddha Dharma teachings, now I'm talking about the complicated ones that people develop. All the scriptures, all the treatises. We're just talking about this. Probably the most complicated Buddhist teaching is Buddhist psychology, Yogacara, which is bound up with Abhidharma. Buddhist psychology consists of two aspects. One is epistemology, 认识论. So the process through which we actually understand things. Another one is kind of a typology, identifying different Buddhist, from the Buddhist perspective, different mental states. So one is about process, another one is kind of typological map. How one engages in practice with this. So even the complicated ones, that's what they focus on, these two, from kind of further elaborations from these two. So does one need to study that? in order to practice Chan. What is the purpose of studying that type of Buddhism? The purpose is to get correct views. What are the correct views? Connections and new beginnings. Dependent origination and impermanence. Realize no self. Emptiness. Nirvana. These two views are not the way we typically think. We don't think in terms of connections. We don't think in terms of new beginnings. How do we think? We have to understand. We think in terms of separateness, independence. I'm different from you. I'm here, you're there. And we think in terms of permanence. It's a very deep-rooted way of thinking. We don't think everything is a new beginning. We think we're carrying this luggage. And most of the time, people are in their head. People are in their heads. This is all that they've ever known. This is their default. This is how they will attempt to solve their life problems. Thinking. Your problems. You think you'll think through it. You can't help yourself. And that's what clouds Buddha Dharma. Because you rely on something that separates. You rely on something that reifies, solidifies, separate reality or that which is fluid into separate, distinct things. What is that? Words and language. That's the nature of words and language, is to categorize, classify, reify, solidify into discrete realities, discrete phenomena. So that's like relying on a thief to help you clean the house. You ask the thief to go clean your room. After the thief finishes, you ain't got anything left in the room. Everything's gone. You're robbed. It doesn't accomplish what you want. So all the different teachings actually points to different ways to talk about that. The nature of words and language. So even Yogacaras, Buddhist epistemology, the way they talk about perception, for example. They distinguish between true perception, valid perception, and invalid perception. The way they talk about invalid perception, 限量, sensory, and mental, and yogic, just the valid perception. Everything else is invalid. The way they talk about it is to get to this point of dependent origination. and the limitation of language. The way they talk about it is this. It's the expansion of the five skandhas, the five aggregates: form, sensation, conception, here, conception, volition, action, and consciousness. The way they talk about that. An expansion of that Buddhist cosmology, epistemology. So, and they critique earlier version of Buddhism, which they attack as the Vaibhashikas, people Shapai, Vaibhashikas, which they call it the realists. So they think if something out here is real, I'm perceiving that form, I'm holding it as a particular sensation, I'm perceiving that. After sensation, I have concept about it, and I engage in some action, and then this action is planting this seed. This is a very simple, simplistic explanation of the five skandhas. So Yogacara interjects this. So we have form, six sense faculties. That's something that's here. Right? But they even deconstruct this. I don't want to complicate it. Let me just take for granted the first stage they recognize here, something real. We have six sense faculties. And then there's sensation. Their proposed view is there's nothing that's outside your consciousness. All things are constructs. So we have sensation, what we experience as sensation, but the sensation before conception. Usually we just sensation, conception. That's how we normally think. Right? There's reality outside ourselves, like the cup. And then we have some experience of it, we have some label of it. But that process of perception, it is the mind's own doing that generates an imprint of this cup. So I'm not really engaging with this cup visually and tactile. So for a split second, the mind generates its own impression, karmic impression. And that impression is called xiang, form, or aspect, let's say aspect. And this aspect replaces the actual thing out there. And then on the basis of this, permeated by the karmic propensity that we bring to our own perception, we generate concepts around it. And we are actually reacting to our own concepts, words, labels. That's why people are completely lost. They're not really dealing with what's happening. They're dealing with their own mental construct of it. And then they're creating the same karma that they've done. You all follow me so far? So in modern neuroscience, for example, they talk about the fact that our brain Our brain has never left its shell, its skull. It just exists on its own in darkness. Like right now, like the way you're sitting now. You think you're looking at me. You think you're looking at others. How does your brain know you're looking? Your brain never went outside. It depends on the sixth sense faculties, right? Depends on eye and nose tongue. You see something, the light, your retina, go through your retina, go through, the occipital cortex in the back. There's pathways, neural pathways directly go to the occipital cortex. It goes first into the limbic system, the core of the emotional center, the most primitive aspect of the mind. Then goes out to the prefrontal cortex. By the way, that's why people most of the time react emotionally rather than cerebrally. It's just disguised as rational thinking, but actually, those people that are maybe cold or very clear thinker, it's just disguises that everything goes through the limbic system first. So whatever agenda that they have, it's concealed by articulate, eloquent speaking, articulation, coolness, calmness. That's a footnote. So information comes in, the brain simulates. That's what neuroscience is. Now, the brain has no idea what is happening out there. It's only experience of reality outside of this dark cave of the skull, the brain, is by simulation of what it thinks it perceives. A world. A large portion of that comes from consciousness, our baggage of previous experiences. The brain's constantly learning. So, small portion of it, they say 10%. 10% depends on actually the stimuli, i.e., sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. 90% come from its own notions, learned, past experiences, conscious processes. That's kind of like a very crude way of explaining very complicated detail, epistemological explanation in Yogacara. From the Yogacara perspective, the aspect is not something that lies before concept. The modern science, they're talking about simulation of images, ideas, notions. That's already a concept. So that's sight, sound, smell on that side. Form, sensation, conception. They're already talking about conception. What Yogacara is talking about is the space between sensation and conception. These different aspects, and they exist only momentarily. Only momentarily. And then, so this is sensory perception. Mental perception, the faculty of mind. It's the same process, how they generate. This is the basis for my teaching of direct contemplation, or my teacher's teaching of direct contemplation, although he doesn't link it with Yogacara. So in my book that's coming out next year, I talk about this in great detail. The theoretical foundation of direct contemplation in Yogacara teachings. So all that is to say that this aspect, that is the valid perception. It's a pure kind of construct of it, pre-linguistic. As soon as that instant passes, the brain or mind is flooded with concepts, notions that just leaves us further and further away from reality. But that's what we rely on. That's why we're lost. That's why our problem is never really resolved. So, because what we depend on are these words, language, constructs, fabrications. So it's not real. So if you depend on the false to solve real problems, you're not going to get an answer from it. So all those complicated teachings, it's just to say these words and concepts brings us further from the truth. And the very nature of things is dependently originated. Different conditions has to come together. If you call it connections, there needs to be different connections. So within it, nothing really exists in the way that we think it exists. So what is there then? Connections, relationships, moment to moment to moment to moment. There's great freedom in that. There's great freedom. We resist that because we hold on to a narrative. This thing didn't go my way. I'm holding on to it, and it brings us great pain. We don't know what things are going to go. Every moment's a new beginning. See? So, what is Buddha Dharma? I spoke about what is Buddha Dharma. The Dharma is actually just freedom, nirvana, the teaching of freedom. But it comes to us from two perspectives: dependent origination and impermanence. Or, to put it very simply, we're talking about connections and new beginnings. The complex stages of practice point to this, but in a roundabout, conceptual way. And some people may think that if they study that, they become more knowledgeable. They may become more knowledgeable. But they're tethered to false. They're tied to more words and language. It's possible that one uses words and language to completely transform the way one thinks with words and language and become free by them. It's possible. But it's such a long, tedious path. That's the position of Chan. And it's so easy to get lost in the forest of words and language. So easy. Right? It's better to just get to the root of things. So I'll end with a story. When my teacher passed away, prior to that, I was going to go into academia, just practice on my own. But I felt that I needed to repay my gratitude to him, all the decades that he put into training me. So I began a small group. And the way I began the group, I wanted to do it in such a way that's closer to the way I learned with the Dharma, with my teacher. The way he trained me with the Dharma was to be his attendant, was to just practice in doing things. He didn't sit me down and taught me Abhidharma or Yogacara or different sutras or the correct way, stages of practice in Buddhism. He didn't do that. So I taught meditation because people want to learn meditation. And it was some years before I even taught Buddha Dharma to the Tallahassee Chan group. Or maybe 4 or 5 years. After 4 or 5 years of practicing meditation, which is answering their questions from practice, I gave a lot of talks, but they're all about practice. They're nothing systematized. They always evolve these two principles. That's reality. That's how things are. So I taught how things are. Before I commented on a scripture, that's the way I taught. That's the way I learned. Why? I want people to establish a solid foundation, practical foundation in their lives as practice. I wanted to get a taste of the flaws and the shortcomings of words and language, the inadequacy. I want them to distrust personally, having personal experience, to distrust the constructs, the narratives. That's my aim. Not rely on that which they rely on all their lives. Like the Buddha said, what's practice about? Someone asked him, he says, to defamiliarize what you have been always familiar with. What is that? Words and language. All the crutches and props that we couch ourselves, prop ourselves up, throw them away. And come close to how things actually are. And then to familiarize with what one has no familiarity with. These two aspects of the Buddha said. So I want my students to not so dependent on that which they've always been familiar. Ruminations, discursive thinking, all the deluded, wandering thoughts. unfamiliar then. And to familiar with what? Their bodies. Grounded in the actual experience of this moment. In practice. Coming back to a method. So it was like 4 or 5 years before I even gave a talk on a series of talk on so-called Buddha Dharma. That's the way I teach. I learn to shake the foundation of people, the foundation which people have built their lives. Shake that. What is that? Words and language. When that's loosened, then we'll be able to, the method will be able to go deep. Many of you try to clean oven. Recently, I had to clean the oven. Yeah. Caked on stuff, right? So what do you have to do? You gotta put some medicine. Actually, they don't call it medicine. Something to make the dirt, make the grime loose. Then you can scrub it. Is that how you guys clean your ovens? Yeah. So spray some oven off. And leave it there for 20 minutes. Then you go back and clean. So the stronger a person is anchored in their words and language, their dependency on it, their complete trust in it, the more I have to shake. So let it sit there. Spray some stuff on you guys. Let it sit there. What is that stuff? Method, practice. Your kind of relationship to start to build. That will shake your foundation. And then coming with a sponge and just wipe it away. Wipe it away. That's intensive Chan retreats. It's meant to wipe away. So now I tried with you a few years back. I keep on getting requests, systematic presentation of Buddhism. I tried. What happened? You guys didn't do the homework. Come to the meeting without reading stuff. Maybe one little rabbit, 一小兔子, one little rabbit read. The rest of the rabbits, dogs, cats, turtles, just come to the class without reading. And then the people continue to change. So I can't build any accumulative words and language because I gotta go back to explain it again, the last class, because this class is new people. Doesn't work. Even at my center, it doesn't really work. Unless I put strict requirements. Then people always beg for exceptions. I know this is a 5-week course, but the third week I gotta have a vacation with my family. For once a year, I gotta have it. So I'm gonna have to miss that class. What am I gonna say? Okay, fine. This person, that person, this person. There's only a small handful that go from beginning to end. And then what did they get? What did they do? You can ask some of the people. I gave a class on Yogacara. I gave a class on Platform Sutra. I gave a class on Lotus Sutra. Vimalakirti. We can put them on the spot now. They're doable. They may cancel their screen now, but What did they get out of it? Can they say anything about it now? Why? Why would they have problem doing that? They may say something because it's words and language. It's words and language. And traditional non-Chan way of Chinese Buddhism, or the whole East Asian Buddhism, the way they teach, words and language. Words and language. Just regurgitating stuff. Still vexed. So it's difficult to learn that way. Easiest ways is to apply two things in your life. What are those two things? Two principles. What is practice about? Connections. New beginnings. And go deep with them. Go deep. So all you have to do is ask yourself, how am I relating, connecting with myself now? How am I connecting with my method? How am I connecting with this person? Am I bringing baggage to this person? Do I see this person as new beginning, new relationship? Am I present? Everyone loves new things, fresh things. So they're interested. So that interest is there. So you have to explore how to be present, how to be interested there. Is it in your capacity to do that? If it's within your capacity to do that, to be present, to connect, then you do that. That's where practice lies. So, systematic presentation of Buddhism is useful. I'll conclude with this. When is it useful? In my humble opinion, it's useful when a practitioner has very, very solid foundation. Because Buddha Dharma, all those elaborate systems, it's very refined analysis. So it's able to shed more depth in the person's practice. But it has to be founded on a foundation in which the person will not depend on words and language, will not reify, solidify words and language into things, discrete realities, separateness. Otherwise, they'll get sucked into the poison of words. So when a practitioner practices for a decade, 10 years, not through reading scriptures or more words and language, actually practice in their body, grounded, and they have clarity. Most of the time, the mind is not too much wandering thoughts. They're very concentrated, they're clear, engaging. Practice. Then when they encounter different Buddhist teachings, like Yogacara, they'll be able to use some of the teachings, the analysis that's refined, and be able to examine their experience. Right? Until then, normal people would just get sucked into the words. More categories, more labels. And these labels refer to each other. It's very complicated. The Buddha Dharma only has very simple principles.